Focus Forward with Holly Borrelli. Holly is owner of Behaven Media in Stillwater, Minnesota. And Behaven Media is a company that creates professional identity systems for entrepreneurs. Holly has a BA in graphic design and information media and is currently seeking a master's in digital photography. Holly is here today to help entrepreneurs understand how important it is to work with a professional to create a complete identity system. Holly, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks.
I'm so excited.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, what is an identity system?
An identity system is everything that an entrepreneur needs to put together to display the company's identity in all different forms.
All right, so what does that include, though?
I know. A lot of people are like, well, what does that actually mean? Well, a professional identity system can include a business card, logo, letterhead, website, possibly even apps. And then it goes so far as to, what people are wearing, in order to present themselves. It could be that, somebody would want to go to a job site and they always want to wear a T-shirt that actually has their information on it. It could be a hat, could be a graphic on a car. So it's pretty much everything that represents you.
Wow, that sounds huge.
Mm-hmm. It is. It could be. Mm-hmm.
So the professional identity system, it's more than just a logo.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of, for me, it's the whole company, right?
Yeah. Actually, a lot of clients will come to me and they'll say, well, I need a logo. And I'm like, okay, let's hold on. We're going to put the brakes on here. We actually need to back up quite a bit because there's a lot of work that goes on before the logo. And then just the logo is one really small component of it.
Okay, so the professional identity system would also be like the color scheme that they're using, and that should be throughout the company, right?
Very much so. When you start these components, you kind of always try to think for growth. So let's say that I'm doing a logo, and the logo maybe only has 2 colors to it. Well, I know that the website is maybe going to need 5 colors. And so when I build the logo, I actually consider, okay, well, what's the website possibly going to need? It's going to need a dark color, it's going to need a light color, it's going to need a color for text, one for emphasis, and I try to put that together when I'm making the logo. And that's why it's so important that all these things get considered right from the get-go, because if you don't, then you're building all these components separately. It costs you more money. You're trying to fit these things separately that really don't go together. And sometimes you might find yourself like really having to settle for things that aren't working because you didn't build them all together. You didn't consider them in the beginning.
So if you decide, okay, what I want my company to be a certain place in 5 years, what you would do is you'd start and you'd build that foundation now with the thought that you're going to move into like this 5-year plan. Because it seems to me like if somebody says I want an identity system, they're probably not thinking I want a skin for my car.
No.
Or I want this. I want my own television show like this. So when you're looking at this, is there like a system that you would use? Like first you're going to have maybe the letterhead, the logo, this and that, and then next year we're going to build this and. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Is that how it goes?
Yes, and I just want to back up a little bit and say that if you go to a graphic designer and you say, I need a logo, and they start building you a logo, you should kind of stop, because that graphic designer needs to know about your business. So when I go in and I talk to somebody about their business, I have to know a lot of information beforehand. Like let's say the person that's going to, I have somebody who I'm doing a design for now, and he's a he's a home inspector. And so I'm like, okay, well, now we can brand you by going through and making shirts for you, and we can brand you by making hats, and we could do, all these things, something on the side of the car. And so he's like, well, I really don't like to wear hats. I'm like, okay, so now we back up from the hats. And, are you going to have multiple people work for you? Are they all going to drive the same type of car? I mean, there's lots of things that go into it that you really have to find out in the beginning. And then you you typically, I try to look maybe 5 years or just a little bit beyond that, because maybe the questions that I'm going to ask, the people really haven't considered. So if somebody comes to me and they say, I need a booklet design, I'll say, okay, is this a booklet design and you're planning on 3 or 5 other booklets, and are those other booklets going to have to match this booklet? And then they kind of sometimes will come out and say, well, yeah, I do have, these other thoughts, these other things. And I'll say, well, let's get this out on the table. It's going to take a little bit more work now, but at least we have something planned, so when you're ready to pull the trigger, we have all that designed, and now you're ready to go. So it's kind of like, I think Covey's tips, don't pull something down and start working on it and then put it away and work on it later. Try to get as much done as you can at one time, because then, you don't have to revisit it in the full spectrum. So it's just kind of like that.
So it sounds almost like you're a bit of a detective.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so somebody comes to you, they say, okay, I want a logo. You're like, okay, wait, let's hold back here. Let's figure a few things out. It's a lot of Q&A, it has to be.
It is.
Lots of Q&A. And then you say, okay, well, then what happens? We have the Q&A. Then do you show them like a series of designs or?
Right. Well, I go through and I pretty much collect all the information, and then I like the client to give me something that they like. And it's funny because I actually don't think that, this is going to sound really weird, I don't think that I build it, I actually think that the client builds it. And if we think about it, I've been thinking about this as I was driving around for the past few days, and it's kind of like what Subway says, that you're going to love the sandwich because you build it. And it's the same thing, and it's a very personalized item, just like that sandwich. So if I ate that sandwich that maybe you built, I wouldn't like it, and it wouldn't work for me. But if you're building your sandwich, it's going to be right for you. So it's exactly the same thing. The more input I get with the client, from the client, the better. And one client that I worked with, that I continue to work with very well, she comes back often, and she has me design, more things using her identity system and her colors and things like that. She was really great because she just went into, I think it was Microsoft Word, and she just pulled out a bunch of random graphics that she liked the looks of. And then she kind of told me, I like this and I like that about these individual graphics. And I was really able to get to the end of the design process, and I was able to really understand from her feedback what she wanted, and then give her the product that worked for her.
Okay, so wait a minute. We have to go back. We have to roll back to something you said.
Sorry.
No. You're doing a great job. I'm really curious about the concept that they build their own.
They do.
It really sounds like you're facilitating exactly what they like and the way they feel about their company and the way they feel about the business they do, maybe also the relationship they have with their client.
Absolutely.
So this is fascinating.
You have to understand, there's so much work that we haven't even talked about that goes into building a brand, which happens before, and then I build the professional identity system from the brand. And it's just awesome when they've already worked out their branding and they've come up with all of these, what are they called when they come up with all those words and everything that...
the core values and the
the
personality
core
traits
values,
and the core brand message.
Yep. And so when I get that package from the branding person who's helped them put that through, by the time, and this is the system that we've got going on now, by the time that I get them, the client is so in tune to what they're doing, who they're talking to, and how they're going to talk to them. And then pretty much, I'm just the visual person. They've done all that, and now I say, okay, well, how do we need to make this into a package that's right for you? And, one of the things is that, you have to have a graphic designer, or I hate to say that I'm a graphic designer because I think that I do more than that, but you have to have a visual specialist who is not designing for them, but who's designing for you, because
Oh,
because
oh.
the
I tell you,
designer.
how many times does that happen?
And
How many times does it happen where you have something, I see it all the time, a logo, and I say to the person, this is your business, do you really like this logo? No. Well, what happened? Well, I kept talking to the designer, but they didn't understand what I was saying, and they just kept creating the same things in the same vein. And that's because they create for them and not for the client. I've had a lot of problems with that.
I have a perfect example. I talk a lot in analogies. And so one of the analogy was I hired an architect to help me redo my house. And he wanted to do it in the arts and crafts style, and I was kind of okay with that. And then he came in to show me some work from the other houses that he's done, and it was exactly the same plan that he was coming up with for me. And I'm like, I kind of let him go because I didn't feel that he was actually making the house for me. He was just repeating what he's already done. And that might be okay in houses. You can put people in similar houses. But when you're talking about entrepreneurship and something that people are working on 80 hours a week, or more, I mean, really, you really have to give them exactly what they need and exactly how to present them, because really your professional identity system works when you're not working. It's there. You're not at the computer in middle of the night or on weekends or whatever, and you're not always talking to your clients or potential clients, but your identity system has to work all the time. And if you don't put your thought into it and really get it to work for you, it's just not going to be good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that is, a lot of times, especially now, that's the point of entry for that person to get to know you, is your online
Presence.
resources or presence. Yeah. So I understand exactly what you're talking about, about creating that brand and then bringing the branding resources to you. I understand that. It's really interesting because a lot of people want to skip the branding process, but the branding process explains everything and goes into everything in the business. So it really creates that firm foundation. So the logo and the identity design is just one small portion of what happens from the branding.
Yeah.
It's like you figure out, who your market is, you figure out, what your product is, what the price of you figure everything out. And then it then goes out to different people. It goes to you, graphic artist, it would go to the video person, it would go to the web designer, and everybody's job is easy. And then everything flows together nicely. So it all works together.
Yep.
So you have a unified system. So now, just getting back to when you were talking about working with the home inspector, and he says, well, I don't like to wear hats or whatever. It's very interesting that people sometimes kind of go to that place. Well, I don't like to do it. When in reality, if you think larger than that from the beginning, maybe that would be a giveaway. So yeah, maybe you don't like to wear hats. Maybe you have a lot of the people in your company, when your company starts growing, that will wear hats and things like that. So it's really interesting that if you can get them out of the them and into thinking larger, then that right away changes the way that they think about their business. And it allows them also to grow a lot more quickly. So I love this idea of just really figuring everything out. How long does that take?
Wow, that depends. And people love to ask that question in the beginning. Drives me crazy. Everything is so individualized, and it really depends on how well I'm working with the client. Like, I had a client maybe about 2 years ago, and the client really wanted to be hands off and wanted to say, whatever you think. And, then whatever I thought really wasn't right, and it really didn't work together because the client, the client didn't want to give of themselves in the process, and I guess they didn't think that their judgment was valuable. And then that client never really got, I think, what was fitting for them. You know, it's kind of like if you go in and you buy a pair of shoes and you never tell the salesman how the shoe feels. You can't really get the right shoe. And so it's the same thing. So that one was a little bit long, but then other ones, you know, like I just worked with Corspective, and it went really well because she actually put the time into finding the certain things. And I work quickly, and I get the things put online right away. I use Facebook a lot for that and build albums. And then I find that if my client gets back to me, I'm then right on it again. So the time frame, if I have a client that's slow and, you know, not really getting things, doesn't really give me feedback timely, it could be a really long, drawn-out process. So I work pretty much as fast as my client. And it also depends on how many things they need, you know, and also the way that we leave it is that I might actually do a professional identity package that comes up with 3 components, but then, you know, the client will visit me maybe, once or twice a year for other components that I do down the road, and that works well. So I think that maybe I can, with good input from the client, I think maybe I could do it in a month's time. But as I said, it really depends.
Okay, and then do you manage, because obviously a lot of these things go to print, do you also then manage the print process?
Yeah, the print process is, you know, that's a tricky one. It's really hard. And yes, I manage the print process, so I do my best on that. Printing is hard. There's no other way about it. And you know, you find good printers, and then you find other printers that, you know, you want to kind of only use once and then not use again. But you know, online, there's a lot of fulfillment online, and you know, you pay for quality, and you know, that goes to color matching, and there's like so many things to consider.
Well, is color matching important?
Oh my gosh. It's paramount. It's paramount. You know, you know, if I'm doing a picture and the person, you know, looks magenta when I get the print back, you know, how are you going to send out 2,000 postcards with, you know, your client looking magenta? I mean, you know, yeah, it's huge, because when you're doing this and you're handing out these things, you don't want to be handing out something that looks like crap, because every single thing is representing your company. And if you chisel on that stuff, then, you know, you're just really representing your company poorly, and you can't do that. I would much rather not give out anything than give out something that represents me poorly.
Really?
Yes, absolutely.
So you would rather not give out anything? Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a bold statement.
Yep. They say that the better a photographer gets, the less work that they show, and it's true.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I've seen that quite a bit.
Yep.
Okay, so in looking at this, would you kind of give us an idea about how that system would work for that 5 years out? Like, what would be the initial pieces, average, that a business owner who's maybe starting out, or somebody who's going to do a rebranding, how would they go through that channel to the 5 years and get the things that they need?
So pretty much you figure out what the client needs, okay? So if they send out invoices, you would maybe want to do letterhead, and so that they have letterhead that they can send out the invoices with. And then do they need envelopes? Do they want those envelopes printed, you know, with their information on it? And so, you know, that could be 2 products right there. You definitely have to make a logo and a business card, and then you go through and while you're creating this, you create things that support it. So let me explain. So like the color schemes. So, you know, like what paper is it going to be on? And so it might not be a white paper, but it might be a yellow paper, it might be gray paper, and now that color can go into the color scheme. And let's say that there's, you know, 3 or 4 colors to the logo. That goes into the color scheme. And, you know, pretty much typically clients want a web presence, which is a good idea. And so now you're picking out a few colors for the website that the web designer can now use those colors. And then, let's see, logo, I'm just trying to think if and then also, I actually do headshots, because I find that if clients don't really consider headshots and their professional image with a photograph, and I'm not quite sure why, but it's extremely important to have one. And then that can go on their website. The website's kind of boring without pictures, and so maybe other pictures need to be taken in order to.
Then it would just be filled with text. Who likes that?
Right, but clients really don't consider that. And the other thing is that you don't always want to rely on graphics that are stock photography. So there might be a series of photos that have to be taken in order to represent yourself or your product or something like that. A lot of my clients, their message is their product, and their message is their product, yeah. And so a lot of times they're representing themselves in pictures and, you know, them speaking and things like that. And if those aren't done professionally and those don't look good, if you're getting a picture taken of you speaking at an event, it can look really, really poor. So it's much better to actually have a professional photographer put that together so it looks like you're at a speaking engagement, but it makes you look, you know, much more professional. So it could be photos, and then pretty much close to the end, I try to put together an identity guideline, and an identity guideline expresses what you should do and what you shouldn't do with all the components of the package, and then that gets sent to. That could get sent to the web person, because I don't do websites, but I do make the web graphics, and then. And it just kind of expresses, okay, you know, whenever you're using this piece, you always use this piece next to it. So maybe there's a logo and there's a lockup. Lockup is the text. And so those always fit together this way. You know, or whenever you're using this color, we always want you to use this texture instead of the color, just use the texture. So there's lots of things like that in order to keep everybody on the same page. And it's especially important if you're not keeping the same graphic designer. You now have this identity guidelines to hand off to anybody. It could be to the printer, a new graphic designer. It could be the person that's making the graphic for the side of the car. It could be if you're getting T-shirts made. I mean, it could be anything. So, or anybody. And so that kind of, you know, helps. You can send that off as a PDF, and then whoever you're working with, then they can, you know, have that at least as a starting point, so that your branding and your identity system is kept intact.
Well, this sounds almost like the Bible, the visual Bible for the, you know, for the company. Because you would have everything in there. You'd have the colors, you'd have the sizes, you have your fonts, you have all those things compiled. And then as a new person, say you have a new person start and you want to have the person write a letter, they're going to know which font to use for that letter and all that.
Yeah, and I'm not the creator of this. I mean, professional identity systems have been around for a very long time.
Right.
Identity guidelines have been around for a very long time. So if 3M or Kodak is working with somebody, they're sent the identity guidelines. And the identity guidelines come, you know, for like 3M or Kodak, it's in a big book. And it's, you know, if you're using one color, you use this logo. If you're doing two color, it's this logo. All this, you know, so you know, it's not new. It's just that, you know, a graphic designer or a person that's putting together your identity package should really kind of consider all these things.
Well, the other thing is, I mean, it's important for small business owners and entrepreneurs to be able to understand how larger companies are doing this. And then they can scale it to what they're doing, so they can have, because nobody knows. At this point, nobody really knows how large a company is. You know, I work with people and talk to people who are doing business globally. They could be doing business out of a tiny office or even out of a, you know, a home office. Nobody knows. But if that professional identity system looks good, then the company is perceived as a solid company. Even if it is in somebody's basement, doesn't matter.
You're exactly right. And there's just like with the use of the word I or we. If you're putting a website up and you're saying I, then now that means that you're a company of one. But if you use the word we, you know, now you kind of are perceived as you have a team. So it's just as simple as that. And you're absolutely right. It doesn't matter if you're a company of one and you have, an office and a closet. Nobody knows that. It's all about your professional identity system that you're putting out there. And, for you not to put money into that or to propagate that, that's where it's at.
Well, this is excellent advice. So let's just very quickly reiterate exactly what those components are. So we said that they were letterhead. A lot of people don't think they need letterhead anymore until they actually need to send out a letter, and then they realize, because they think they're going to do everything online, and no business is doing everything online. So letterhead, envelopes, billing sheets,
Yep.
Logo, your color spectrum, probably a font that you would use.
Several
Fonts, and then what other things for that initial package?
It could be web graphics, because a lot of people don't consider, or a lot of people say that they're not going to launch their business until they get a web presence. And so, it would be web graphics also.
Web graphics, and then probably business card.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that would be the initial components.
Yep, and now and that could trickle into, let's say that there's product. It could actually go into product development.
Yes.
Because if you have a client who's actually selling their message, well, how are they selling it? Are they selling it in an online book? Are they selling it as a physical book? Are they putting those booklets into a box? Are they selling that box at speaking engagements? Mm-hmm. And so this really all trickles down to even, what are you selling? It just goes right on down. How are you making your money? And that's, one of those initial visits. How are you making your money? What's your product? Who are you selling to? Is it business to business? Is it business to, So it's like...
Well, that's also part of the branding.
Exactly.
That you go through all of that in the branding, and people have to understand who their market is, how they're selling to that market, how the market wants to be sold to.
Exactly.
So, depending, and there's also huge variances in that. So, Holly, give us some tips. Give our viewers some tips on how they can go about maybe working with a professional or, creating this identity system.
I actually have 2 tips for the logo development itself, something that I've noticed has been a trend. Normally when designers would start and do a logo, what they would do is they would consider, okay, it's only just going to be one color, it's going to be a very flat logo. And if you think about like 3M's logo or Kodak's logo, it's very flat, there's no real pop to it, and that's so that they can use it on everything. Well, what's happening now is that a lot of it is online, and so because there's such a big online presence, we're actually able to do a lot more shading and a lot more with that logo in order to make it a little bit more complex. The last tip I want to leave you with is to think square. A lot of our online marketing, it has to fit inside of a square. So if you are getting a logo developed and it is long, always have a second version that you can use in a square.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so Holly, thank you so much for being here. I hope you'll come back again and give us some more information, because I still have more questions. So you have been watching Focus Forward. Thank you so much. We have had Holly Borrelli here from Behaven Graphics, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Hey, this is Robert Dempsey with your Tips from the Net. And today I want to tell you about a little survey that I read about improving the in-store customer experience for web-enabled customers. And really all that fanciness means is that people are walking into retail stores with their mobile phones, which obviously have the internet on them, and so they are really changing their buying behavior. Now, the question is someone shopping on an online store or a brick and mortar, right? Or are they doing both? So for instance, for me, I have been known to walk into a bookstore, peruse the books, and then actually buy that book on Amazon for my Kindle, or actually order it off Amazon. And the store that I went into was obviously not Amazon because they don't have stores. Now, Retail Systems Research did a survey talking to retailers about cross-channel activities, which basically means online, offline, etc. And what they found was that 65% of people surveyed would buy online and return it in store. 58 bought in store and then fulfilled through online or direct, so they could get it sent directly to their house. And 42% were buying via a mobile device, and 21% actually bought via a social commerce site, so some like daily deal kind of website or what have you. So interesting thing though, if you are a retailer, the big lesson here is that your customers want to be able to walk into a store, buy your product, whether it's right there in the store or online. They want to be able to buy it, get it shipped to their house, or any combination of any of these factors. So keep that in mind if you have a store. You really got to cater to the way that people are buying nowadays, and this is it. So I am Robert Dempsey. This is your Tips from the Net for the week. I will see you next time.